Hi, it's Wayne from howtofish.com.au. We can't go fishing at the moment, so I've been having a look at some of the fishing times I've had when I've really enjoyed myself. Let's have a look at a few.
A while ago I was fishing at the Maribyrnong River. It was morning, the tide was high, and the fish were biting. I got some burley in there, and of course, as usual, start with smaller fish because they're the ones that are most numerous. There was plenty of those about, and it was pretty good because I'd been using burley to attract them into the area, and then I was using a range of baits to hook them. I was also using a really lightweight rod. And the great thing about that is if you expect the fish to be relatively small in the area that you're fishing, using a lightweight rod means you feel like you've got much bigger fish. So it's a bit more of a challenge to get them in. I was using lighter line as well, so even though the fish I was catching were small, it was still great fun to get them in because you felt like you had something bigger on the rod. And because I'd been bringing more fish into the area, I started to use bigger baits, and the fish started to get a little bit bigger as I progressed. So each fish seemed to be successively bigger, which was really good. I kept adding more burley to the area. I kept changing baits and casting the same spot each time, and the fish were coming in. I felt pretty good about progress so far, but of course the fish were pretty small. While I was speaking into the camera, my rod went off, and this time I was into something bigger. And because I was using this lightweight rod and light line, I had to play it a lot better than I had the other fish, because there's always a chance this was going to get off, break the line, or snag me. Lucky for me, I was able to get it in, sort of get it around a few snags because it was sort of zipping around all over the place. And then it turned out to be quite a nice little pinky, which is great for this area. I've just got to watch my fishing rods. Now the good thing about having your camera facing your rods is that you can see the reflection of what's happening, and once again I wasn't watching and I'd hooked into something. And this is freshwater. This is in country Victoria. This is up near Shepparton, just on the outskirts of Shepparton. This is one of the irrigation channels up there, the main eastern channel, and it's got plenty of carp, redfin, and some cod in it. It's the waters come from the Waranga Basin. Now I hadn't brought my landing net with me, so this was going to be a little bit of a maneuvering exercise to get this thing in. It wasn't a massive fish, it was a carp by the way, but it was using the flow of the water to give me all kinds of troubles. So yeah, it took a little while to get in. Now carp do have a bad reputation, we know that, for all of the damage they do, but I've got to admit that they're one of those fish where they provide some sport. They can get pretty big, and there's a lot of them. So I guess if you're going to go fishing and you want to hook into some fish, there's always a chance of catching a carp. And this one here, as you can see, there's a bit of a bend in that rod there, and he didn't like being hooked, strangely enough. So all I had to do was tire him out. So in this video, the flow of the water is going from left to right. So you can see that he's coming in now, but for most of it he'd actually gone downstream. That's where he created all of the pressure. Now he's come further up. Now what I've got to do is try and work out how to get him out of that water. And this is without a net, so that was going to be a little bit of a challenge. After fighting for a little while, I got him directly under the rod. Now I wouldn't recommend putting a lot of pressure on a fish when you've got it directly under the tip of the rod. As you can see, I've got it here. The rods I was using were very long. They were 3.6 meter graphite and fiberglass quiver tip rods. So they had a lot of flex in them, and they were acting as a shock absorber. If you're working with a high percentage graphite rod, then you're not going to have near as much bend in it, so that could break the line. So you just got to work out how you're going to manage it, and if you can't get a bend in your rod like this because you've got graphite, then the thing to do is to use the drag on your reel to allow it to pull off line until it gets tight enough to drag in. And this is it. So reasonable size, and you can see those the big tail and the big fins make it create resistance in the water. And when the fish uses the current to create resistance and pull away from you, and you're using light line and a flexible rod, it's great sport. So I was pretty happy to have caught this, especially after not paying attention to my rod in the first place. On another trip, I fished at Seymour in the Goulburn River, and I was using the electric bite alarm. So this time I got a bit smarter. I had my rod set up so that the moment any line was taken, it would run through this buzzer, some rollers in the buzzer, and it would sound off. So it started running off. I actually wasn't paying attention, but this time it didn't really matter that much because I got an alert straight away. But once again, the fish swims out into the mainstream of the water, uses the current, and it just is a fantastic fight on relatively light line. The only thing that happened here was trying to get this fish in. So it was into the shallow water, but I couldn't actually wade in to get it. I didn't have any waders on or gumboots on, so I had to bring it close enough, and that just took a little bit more time. And of course, there's always a chance that you'll lose the fish when you're mucking around trying to get it in close. Also, I had to use the drag on this case because I was using a graphite rod, so not as much bend in it. As you can see, the rod is not bending near as much as it did on that previous one, so I just had to play it with the drag, wait for the fish to tire a little bit. And once again, these fish, they get to a reasonable size, which is good, so I just had to get this one in. And when I say a reasonable size, this one was big enough to break my net. Ah, damn. Yet again a carp, and a reasonable size as well. So estimated this one at around about, I think, 4 to 5 kilos, and using that current, of course, feels a lot bigger. These are great fun to catch. Now another time fishing in Shepparton, I was fishing into one of the irrigation channels that goes through some of the farmland to allow for irrigation for crops and to feed cattle and pasture. And you can see how narrow this is. It's probably only about 1.5 meters deep, but there's still fish in them, and sometimes it's surprising how big those fish can be. This water holds redfin, cod, and of course carp. And look, there's small carp like this, but they also get quite a bit bigger. Now these irrigation channels also have yabbies in them. In fact, it can be a little bit of a problem because they burrow into the sides of the channels, and then what happens is the banks of the channels collapse after a while. But they're great fun to catch. Just a piece of string with a bit of meat on it and a little net, and all you're doing is you're waiting for the yabby to pull against the string, trying to remove it, trying to take it back to its burrow, and then you just pull it in bit by bit and get your net under it once you've lifted it off the bottom. They're great fun to catch. And with these strings and meats, they seem to want to continue to take the meat. Whereas if you use one of the circle nets, they get used to it after a while. But as you can see, this is typical of the size of yabbies you get in this water. The tails make fantastic bait if you're going to use them that way, or you can eat them and they taste superb. They are the sweetest flesh I've ever tasted. Now, as I was saying, the fish in these small irrigation channels can get bigger. So here I'd hooked into a larger fish, and what attracted them was simply the burley that I was using. So typically I was using a burley cage, and that's what was attracting the fish in. I was using a size 8 hook, and I was using 3.5 kilo line. So I couldn't play it too hard. It felt quite big, and it took a little while to get in. The great thing about this water, on this particular day, there was no flow. So there was nothing that it could use against me other than just its own sheer strength. But it did have a bit of that. And the worst thing was, I didn't have my landing net with me. It was in the car, so I had to walk backwards over to the car, get it out and get back. Not organized at all, but it was still making it fairly exciting. At this point I realise that my net is not where it should be. It's in the car, and so I have to put the rod down, run around to the car, retrieve it and come back, all the time hoping that the fish doesn't get away. So I had my net. All I had to do now is get the fish in. Simple as that. The only other thing that was a problem was that I was actually standing on a bridge. There was a pipe going from under this bridge and a roadway to the channel on the other side of the road, so I had to keep it from going underneath into that big pipe, but luckily I could keep it on top. And that's the one thing about these big fish: if you can get them to the top, get them to actually take a breath, if you get them to open their mouth so that air gets in, it seems to stop them either going down deep again very quickly, or at least it slows down the fight. So there you have it, another nice carp. A bit of a stomach on it too, so this one carried a bit of weight. I think it was probably about 6 or so, 5 to 6 kilos, this thing. And in that still water, it fought well. The burley brought it in, and it's great to be able to catch these things, especially in small waterways like these irrigation channels in country Victoria. I can't wait until the COVID restrictions are lifted and I can get out fishing again.